So you're probably someone like most people who have been contemplating whether you should move states, move cities, move counties, or whatever it might be. And your whole goal is to move to somewhere that has a lower cost of income so that you can save more money and unlock greater wealth building potential, or even increase the income you have, the discretionary income. And this is a conversation I get with a lot of people. You know, I moved from the South, lived in LA. Right now I'm currently living in Seattle. I went from a place in the South where people are making $7.35 an hour minimum wage, whereas in Seattle, people are making $21 minimum wage, working at McDonald's, working at Starbucks. You know, I have this conversation a lot with my friends, or saw my friends graduate from college and, you know, they moved to Alabama, $12 an hour or something like that, right? And so I get it. I thought about this myself. You know, I did live overseas for a year, where I figured if I live over here, I can build some wealth and build some money. And I do talk about this a little bit, about how you can just move down. If you're in LA, just move and live in Mexico for 6 months to get your way out of debt. Just watching a video by Stephan, Jack Selby on Iced Coffee Hour, where they met with Meet Kevin and was talking about how you do not want to move to a low cost of entry state. We just hung out with some friends this weekend as well, and they were thinking about moving, new friends, moving to Minnesota. They told our other friends who we are actually really close with that they decided not to. They decided to stay in the Tacoma, Seattle area. And this is why. I'm gonna give you 5 reasons why I think you should not move to a low cost of income location, especially when you are starting out your careers or trying to build a foundation to make sure that you are financially free when you retire. You start to build your family, you're free from the crippling financial situation that most people are in, and how you actually build wealth. First one, off the bat, like I mentioned earlier, your income potential is so much higher, right? I had some friends that visited me about a week ago. They didn't visit me. They work at the place that I'm a contractor for, and they flew in to visit this site. And he was like, yo, he overheard some girls talking at Starbucks, and they were complaining that they were making $19 an hour. And this is outside of Seattle. And he was like, wait, how much are they making here? And my wife was like, you know, they make 19 to 21, 23, depending on where they're at in the city. He's like, what? That's crazy. There's full-fledged 35, 40-year-olds with full-time families in Alabama where he's at that aren't making that much. And these are teenagers making that much. And yes, the cost of living is a lot higher. When I went from Atlanta to here, you know, I was paying $13.50, $14.50, $17.50. I think the last place I lived in Hawthorne, California was $19.85. That was for a 2-bedroom apartment. The issue is that people don't realize that, yeah, rent is more expensive, but I have friends in Atlanta now. I'm like, how much are you paying for rent? They're paying $1,600, $1,700. I'm like, I was living 15 minutes walking from the beach when I was in Long Beach. Now I'm in Hawthorne. I'm 15 minutes away driving, not even 8 minutes away from the airport. So that's something to think about. And when you think about the fact that the income is way higher, right, you might be able to double your salary, not even change your careers, just going from Atlanta, Los Angeles, California to Seattle. So by doing that, you automatically double the amount of money that you're bringing into your house. And then when you calculate the fact that your cost of living, your gas, your utilities, gas is cheaper in the West Coast than it is in the South. Not gas. Insurance is actually cheaper in the West Coast than it is in the South. So you actually save money that way. Your utilities is way cheaper. I learned that after moving. So your expenses don't double in price like most people think. Yes, if you're trying to buy a house, that's a different story, but I'll get into that later. When it's just someone that's a single adult, or maybe a young family that isn't ready to settle down somewhere, your income goes up drastically. Just think about it. If you are even working bartender, McDonald's, Starbucks, because you want the ability to go to school for free, your income goes from that base pay, $8, $9 an hour that you might get, that's above the minimum wage in Atlanta or anywhere in the South, pretty much anywhere in the West, the East Coast, where it could be like $10, $11 an hour. You move to LA, you're getting $21 an hour. In Long Beach, they were giving $21 an hour for entry-level dishwasher, cook, McDonald's stuff, and you get a free phone after 6 months of working there. Right, so your income goes up a lot. I have friends here, friends in LA that, you know, they modeled on the side, they did music or whatever, but they worked at a gym as a front desk, or they worked as a bartender. They worked at, even my training friends, they worked at bartenders on the weekends because they were getting paid $600, $700 just for one day. I have friends that served here in Seattle, and they served at a fish restaurant called Ivor's, which is kind of fast food, but they also have a diner as well, or a actual restaurant location. And they're making $300, $400 a night just serving, and they might be only serving for 6, 7 hours. That's more than what some people back home they're getting paid for a full 9 to 5 salary job. So your income goes up a lot. That leads me into point number 2. Your career opportunities and your advancement opportunities are so much greater. There's an easier chance to go to school for free in California. The community colleges are free if you're a citizen of California. And then you have all of these small beauty schools, these tech schools. You have people doing free courses, free workshops for real estate, or free workshops for investing. You have the opportunity to meet people. I was working at a gym called Equinox, and the opportunity it presented to me gave me so much clarity and allowed me to be where I'm at today, where in about 5 years, I'll be able to start saving for retirement. If I still lived in Atlanta, I wouldn't have the opportunity. I have so much opportunity now because I was able to, meet with some millionaires, meet with people. Like when I was working at the gym, I trained them on the side. And in 5 years, they went from living in Compton, going to Compton High School, to now living on the Glendale Hills with $3 million house with $2 million of cars, side and inside, and owning a medical practice facility. If I was in Atlanta, I wouldn't have got exposed to that. I wouldn't have got exposed to all the people I know who made money in real estate, owning businesses, and they're younger than me, about my age. And the career opportunities and advancements is just higher. Even thinking about living in Seattle now, my wife is in marketing, her friends are in marketing as well, and she was just talking about how there's just way more people in LA doing that. And the reason why is because there's more businesses out there. There's a reason why people go to LA for like music or whatever, because the opportunities just exist there. And yes, some people struggle, but a lot more people make it than struggle. Whereas if you were in Atlanta, you can't really make it that much because there's not that many opportunities. So you have to choose and pick your battles. Like Atlanta is really good for Black businesses, for tech people, and things of that nature. But if you want to make it in something that's a lot more creative or in real estate, you need to be in the West Coast or somewhere like Chicago, New York, something that it's a lot higher cost and a lot lower barrier of entry. And they always say you want to go somewhere with low competition in Atlanta, in Tennessee, in Memphis, or in Dallas, Texas. If there's no clientele, it doesn't really matter. Because there's no clientele and there's no businesses as well, your opportunities are a lot lower. Third is you have access to high quality services. A lot of people will complain about LA because taxes are high, or California, or the West Coast, or whatever. First of all, right now in Seattle, I'm not paying state tax, I'm only paying federal income tax. Yes, it costs a lot more for stuff here like tea, coffee. I'm in the Capital One Lounge. As you can see behind me, the ad is going around. Right now during the World Series, it's giving away free coffee, free drinks and stuff like that. But I'm also a client of Capital One. I have their credit card, so I'm able to use this Nook. Cat is in the Nook right now. My wife is in the Nook, nursing the baby, and I was doing her own work, and I'm out here recording. So shout out to Capital One. Go check out the credit card. It gives you, $250 bonus if you open up a checking account, and then the credit card itself, I think, bonus is like 75,000 points, which is like $1,000, $1,200 if you know how to maximize the transfer partners for Capital One and learn how to transfer to unlock travel benefits rather than just doing cash back or something. So go check that out. I'll post the link down below. Yeah, it just gives you opportunities and stuff like this. And there's apps where you get $5 as a mystery bag. So you might pay 20% of what you would normally pay just by getting this mystery bag, or just the fact, like I mentioned earlier before, taxes in Seattle is a lot better than LA. In LA, paternity leave is a lot better than out in the West. We have friends that are now here in Seattle and they're still working for Georgia-based companies, and they're like, they don't get the maternity leave. Seattle and LA both give you 3 months of paid maternity leave for 90%, and you can take up to 6 months, so 3 months and then 3 months of unpaid. A lot of places in the East Coast don't have the opportunity. So when people complain about taxes being high, they don't realize that they're missing a lot of these other benefits as well. You have the ability to qualify for a larger loan amount, first-time home buyers, down payment assistance in a lot of places. Like I mentioned earlier, free college, free community college, which doesn't really happen out on the East Coast that much, or even in the South. Places with low income and then low cost of living don't really have the opportunity that much. You have a lot of like cheap grocery stores here. You have a lot of places that sell dollar food, not just McDonald's. McDonald's ain't even $1 anymore. It's like $2.30 for like a double. But you have places serving $1.25 tacos, $1 tacos. You have Grocery Outlet. You have all these other bargain grocery stores, not just all these out there. So you have opportunity to services, to resources, to mental health stuff, to a lot of free healthcare that you don't really have access to when you live in a small city or for a place where the tax dollars isn't that much, so they're not able to actually care for the community as much. The last two I kind of mentioned. So the first one is going to be real estate and property gains, right? If you think about in Atlanta, you might double your real estate value in like every 15 years or so. But in LA and Seattle, your real estate would double every 10 to 11 years. So if you look at a 30-year period, so let's say most people's retirement planning is a 39-year period. So let's just say 30. So you go from 30 years old to 60 years old of planning retirement in real estate. 30 years. By the time, if you're in the West Coast, in the big cities, I think Chicago might be like this, New York might be like this as well. You gotta think, you double every 10 years. So over the course of a 30 period, you actually eat extra income. So just look at this. If you buy a property for $1, at the end of 10 years, it's $2. At the end of 20 years, it's $4. At the end of 30 years, that's $8, so 8 times. Whereas in Atlanta, it's every 15 years, right? Or in a lot of these low cost of living, every 15 years. So you gotta think about it. At the end of 15 years, you go from 1 to 2. At the end of 30 years, you go from 2 to 4. So now you got 4 times your value of your real estate property versus 8 times if you're in the West Coast. And the fact that houses cost a lot more in the West Coast, but they also set it by a lot of these grants or up in the amount of house you can buy at the time. Yes, if you can't afford it, don't get it. But if you can get into a property, let's just think you get an $800,000 house in Seattle, 30 years from now, it's going to be worth 6.4. So now you just gain $5 million versus if you went in Atlanta and you got a $300,000 house, 15 years it's worth 600,000, 30 years it's worth 1.2. You just gained what, 900,000 or something like that. So 5 versus 900. Think about it. So real estate actually drives a lot of businesses, right? If you can make a business succeed out here, it's easier to franchise in other places, or you just have a lot more customers that you can advertise to, you can sell, whether it's online or locally to, so you can grow your business a lot faster here and actually increase the value. But at the end of the day, when you move to a low cost of living area, your opportunities just are lower, whether it comes to buying into real estate. A lot of these places have low cost of living. They aren't appreciation markets, meaning in real estate, anything that you invest in doesn't grow up in value that much. They're more cash flow based. But when you think about wealth building, you think about becoming debt free, financially independent, it's not going to do it for you. That's going to help you save some money, and there are ways around that. But when you think about retirement planning, that is not the way to go. Also, like I said, your career opportunities, your career advancements, there's not that many CEOs and people that are financial officers living out there, or you don't have the opportunity to start a business in certain fields. You don't have the ability to be exposed to industry leaders or new advancements or anything of that regard. You have to wait until it comes out your way, or you have to wait until it's already 5 years down the road. Like, just think about fashion. Fashion explodes in New York, it explodes in LA, and then it comes to everywhere else after. Right, and this applies to not just fashion, this applies to a lot of other industries, especially tech. So if you are someone that's in the tech industry, maybe you build websites, graphic design, AI, whatever it is, if you live in some place like that, you're gonna be behind the curve, or you're gonna have to work harder researching in those places, tapping into networking opportunities with people. The last one I would say is going to be networking. You're gonna be having to go travel for these business meetings or travel for these conferences, these workshops, because networking opportunities are gonna be far and few in between. A lot of these big, even if you just look at what the South has to offer, especially Atlanta, a lot of Black business and Black entrepreneurship. So anybody that's a Black entrepreneur in the West Coast usually has to travel to Atlanta for this. So they have to travel for it, to meet people, to network. But anything else, tech stuff, hospitality stuff, sports stuff, you have to travel to the West Coast for it. So if you're in this type of industry, you just have to make more of an effort, or you miss out on that opportunity to do so. And now before I end, the one exception I have to say this is if you research the area that you move to that is low cost of income, if it's an area that they are doing proposals for, you see a lot of growth happening, it might be smart because you'll be one of the first people in those areas, and you can capitalize on all the new business, you can capitalize on all the job openings, you can capitalize on all the real estate gains or real estate growth. But if it's just a place that's just typically known to have low cost of living, but there's not a lot of movement happening, maybe people are moving away from it, you might not want to do that. So I would say if you want to live somewhere that's low cost of entry, do your research. As I mentioned earlier about Mexico and about Southeast Asia living there, the reason why I would say you can do that is because you want to make sure you're still employed by a US company. So if you're in LA, you get employed by a Los Angeles or a San Diego company, and you just live in Rosarito, you live in Ensenada, you live in San Diego. So if you have to take a drive once a week or once a month to go do work there, you can do so. Now your rent has gone from $2,000 to now you live in $1,000, $1,100 off of the ocean, right? Or you live in a place where now all your food is super cheap, it's super healthier. You can just stack up, save money. When I was in Southeast Asia, we spent $19,000 something over 1 year of traveling overseas. It would have been a little bit less than that if we didn't go to Europe or to Japan, but let's just say Southeast Asia, if we take that out and we average it, we probably would have spent about $17,000 over the course of 12 months. Our rent in LA alone was $19.85. Times that by 12, that's almost $24,000. That's like $22,000 probably dollars that we spent on rent alone in LA. Living in Southeast Asia for travel, for food, for accommodations, for every single thing. It was under $1,700–1,800 a month. So we saved a lot of money by living over there. Sometimes you might want to do that, especially if you're getting out of debt, but you need to make sure you have a skill where you can work remotely for a US-based company, or you do teaching, or you do customer service. And even then you can get a $13 an hour job and still make out on top, versus if you were in the United States of America, in Atlanta or in Auburn, you get a $13 an hour job, you're still spending 80% of that on just living, 90% of that, maybe even more, because most people are going into debt every single year. But by moving overseas and having that US-based $13 an hour, $15 an hour job, you're actually able to save up a lot more money. That is the only time it makes sense to move to a low cost of income, is if you can get a base pay in a high cost of income state. So I have a lot of friends that move from LA to Houston or to Dallas, but they're still employed by SoCal or Northern California companies. So they took a little bit of a pay cut, but because they kept a high paying job in one state and they moved to a low cost of income state, they was able to offset that. And that is actually really smart. Don't do the opposite way. Hopefully this makes sense. Let me know what you think. Remember, go check that Capital One. You get that $250 bonus by setting up a checking account, or you can get the 75,000 points by hitting my link for my credit card below.